Everyone said it was impossible, that only America, Russia, or China could build world-class fighter jets, that small nations should never even try. But one country did, and what it built didn't just challenge the superpowers, it humiliated them. Because when the smoke cleared, the smallest air force in Europe had just outsmarted the biggest militaries on Earth. This is how Sweden broke every rule of air warfare and built a jet the world was never supposed to see. For nearly half a century, the world was told a story written by superpowers. They said only the biggest nations could dominate the skies, that you needed billions in defense budgets, sprawling air bases, and fleets of aircraft carriers to stand among the elite, that air dominance was the privilege of giants, America, Russia, China. But that myth has just exploded. Because one small Nordic nation with no global bases, no aircraft carriers, and barely 11 million people has quietly done what no one believed possible. It didn't just build a jet, it built a revolution. This is the story of the Saab Gripen, a story of how Sweden outsmarted the world superpowers and rewrote the laws of modern air warfare. For decades, global air power was defined by muscle, by weight, by size, by the number of engines or missiles a plane could carry. The bigger the jet, the more powerful the nation. That was the rule. But modern wars changed everything. In places like Syria, Libya, and Ukraine, the world witnessed the truth that size no longer guarantees survival. Missiles now travel faster than ever. Drones swarm skies once thought secure, and massive, expensive aircraft have become easy targets. The old belief that bigger is better is dying, and in its place, a new idea is taking flight. That agility, speed, and adaptability are now the real superpowers of air combat. Sweden saw that future decades before anyone else. The 1980s, the Cold War still raging. NATO on one side, the Warsaw Pact on the other. And between them, Sweden, a neutral nation, but one constantly under the shadow of potential invasion. Sweden knew that if war came, its runways would be destroyed in hours. Its bases would vanish in missile fire. So instead of copying America's massive air force, Sweden designed something completely different, a fighter that could survive the first strike. They called it Gripen, in Swedish, the Griffin, a mythological creature, part eagle, part lion, symbolizing speed and strength combined with intelligence. The Gripen wasn't made to show off at air shows. It was made to survive. It could take off from highways, refuel in forests, and rearm beside trucks in all under 10 minutes. When enemy missiles level air bases, most air forces are grounded, but not the Gripen. It disappears into the countryside, hides, strikes, and vanishes again. For Sweden, every road became a runway, every forest a base. That philosophy changed everything. The Gripen wasn't just a plane, it was a mindset. Survive first, strike fast, never be predictable. But when the Gripen E, the latest evolution, was revealed to the world, few took it seriously. A single-engine jet from a small country? How could it possibly compete with the likes of the F-35 or Su-35? Analysts dismissed it, defense giants mocked it. Then the results came in. The Gripen's electronic warfare system, Arexis, stunned even NATO engineers. It could detect, jam, and blind enemy radar systems from miles away, turning the battlefield into an electronic fog where only the Gripen could see clearly. Its AESA radar provided long-range tracking and multi-target engagement rivaling far larger fighters. And its data link, one of the most advanced ever developed, allowed Gripens to share every piece of information in real time. If one jet sees the enemy, they all see it. Together, they form a single, unified web of intelligence, a digital swarm that can hunt, strike, and vanish. That's the real power of modern air warfare: information dominance. And Sweden mastered it. Meanwhile, superpowers struggled. The American F-35, while powerful, came with nightmarish maintenance costs and strict dependence on U.S. support infrastructure. Russia's Su-35 looked intimidating, but lacked the data integration and jamming capabilities needed in modern combat. And China's J-20, still shrouded in secrecy, expensive to maintain, and years away from full-scale production. The Gripen E quietly sidestepped all of it. Cheaper, faster to upgrade, easier to maintain. While superpowers spent billions on flashy prototypes, Sweden perfected practicality. The Gripen E's plug-and-play architecture allows software and hardware upgrades in days, not years. Its modular systems can switch between air defense, ground attack, or reconnaissance missions with minimal reconfiguration. In essence, it's a fighter built like a smartphone: update, adapt, evolve. That's how Sweden outsmarted everyone. The first nations to notice weren't the richest, they were the smartest. Brazil, Hungary, the Czech Republic. Countries that saw through the illusion of size. They didn't just buy a fighter jet, they bought independence. Because owning a Gripen means freedom from political control. No hidden strings, no dependence on Washington or Moscow for spare parts or permissions. For Brazil, it meant building a domestic aerospace industry with Swedish partnership. For the Czech Republic, it meant affordable defense with cutting-edge capability. And for Sweden, it was validation. A small country had done what global giants could not: built a fighter that offered real freedom. As the Gripen spread across the world, the superpowers started paying attention. Because this wasn't just a jet, it was a threat to the old order. Washington realized that smaller nations could now field modern air forces without American weapons or influence. Russia saw a European fighter capable of penetrating its radar zones and surviving in its electronic warfare spectrum. And in defense ministries worldwide, the message was clear: the monopoly on air dominance was broken. The Gripen's real weapon isn't its missiles or radar, it's its philosophy. A belief that warfare in the 21st century is about brains, not brawn. About resilience, not extravagance. While the world's giants built aircraft for prestige, Sweden built one for survival. And that philosophy turned the Gripen into a legend. It can take off in 500 meters, land in even less. It can refuel with a single truck. It can be maintained by just a few technicians, not hundreds. When war comes and runways fall, the Gripen keeps flying. When networks collapse, its pilots can still coordinate through its secure data web. And when the enemy thinks it's gone, it's already behind them. The Gripen E isn't just an aircraft. It's a blueprint for the future of air power. Smaller nations across Europe, Asia, and South America are now studying the Swedish model to build leaner, faster, more adaptable forces. Even NATO itself has quietly integrated Gripen's electronic warfare data-sharing concepts into future strategy. Because in the age of hypersonic weapons and digital warfare, survival means adaptability. And nobody understands adaptability better than Sweden. The Gripen E represents more than technology. It represents a change in how we think about security, independence, and innovation. It proves that a nation doesn't need endless money to build greatness, just clarity of vision. In a world obsessed with power, Sweden chose precision. In a world chasing dominance, Sweden chose balance. And in doing so, it shattered one of the oldest myths in military history, that only superpowers can rule the skies. So today, as global defense analysts debate budgets and blueprints, the truth remains quietly parked on Swedish runways and Brazilian tarmacs. A single-engine jet, compact, agile, deadly. It doesn't roar for attention, it doesn't brag with numbers, it simply works and wins. Because sometimes victory isn't about having more, it's about using less, smarter. The Gripen is proof that the age of giants is over. that innovation beats intimidation, and that a small, determined nation can still change the balance of global power. Sweden didn't just build a fighter jet. It built a philosophy of survival and gave the world a new definition of air superiority. The world thought small nations couldn't challenge the giants, but Sweden just proved sometimes David doesn't just defeat Goliath, he flies circles around him. This is the Gripen revolution, and it's only just begun. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe and turn on notifications, because next we'll uncover how smaller air forces around the world are quietly rewriting the future of warfare, one innovation at a time.